I bought the lake in 2019. Not the shoreline, not the access rights, but the lake itself, the bed, the water column, the riparian buffer. The title's 14 pages long, but page 4, that's where it's crystal clear. Shoreline owners get non-commercial access. No fee-based activities, no commercial use, no structures on the lake bed unless I say so. I left for a 14-month federal contract in Alaska that August. And while I was away, the HOA president built a resort. 199 vacation rental cabins, a lodge, a commercial boat launch right into my lake bed, a floating dock 340 feet long with 44 steel pins driven into my lake bed, all of it marketed at $285 a night for access to my water. Not a single call from him. 3 board members had asked him to reach out to me. One resigned when he ignored the request. Who owns the lake? Have you contacted them? They asked twice, recorded it in the minutes, and he ignored it. To him, lake access meant lake ownership. When I came back from Alaska in October, I stood on my western shore and counted the rooftops. Then I called my water rights attorney. 14 months later, the settlement $24.09 million. 44 steel pins pulled out of my lake bed. Lake access removed from the resort's listings per court order. 199 cabins in the woods. He never read page 4. But let's rewind a bit. Dana's first call came on a Tuesday night in late September. I was in the field 14 months into a federal contract in the Susitna River Basin far from my phone. The work kept me on the move 6 days a week. Dana, my partner, was handling the property. We had agreed she'd manage the routine and I'd take care of anything outside the norm. She'd called 3 times in the last 3 weeks and I returned her calls each time. She described the usual friction I'd gotten used to with the HOA. I assumed this time would be the same. It wasn't. We owned the only non-HOA parcel in the Lake Harrow watershed. The HOA had owned the shoreline since the early 2000s, 340 acres of residential lots with riparian access to the lake. The HOA was your standard neighborhood association lawn maintenance rules, architectural review gate access management. I figured any issues Dana mentioned were just the usual stuff. Turns out I was wrong. On October 12th, after finishing up a project, I boarded a flight back home. 14 months away had made the Carolina light seem strange for a moment, before it felt familiar again. Dana met me at the gate, handed me coffee, and took my bag. We were driving down I-85 before she spoke. "I need you to see it before I tell you how bad it is," she said. "Because if I tell you first, you won't process it correctly." "Is it that bad?" I asked. "Just wait until you see it." The access road to Lake Harrow had been the same for years, a gravel track through second-growth hardwoods. Private gated title to the property, I drove it the way I had so many times before, remembering every curve and every creek crossing. Then the lake started to peek through the trees. And there on the eastern shore, 47 cabins. Not a cluster, a development. Prefabricated units lined up along the shoreline, each one with a deck facing the water. I stopped the truck. My mind was still trying to process what I was seeing. I counted the cabins, 47 from this angle alone. Behind them was a paved loop road connecting all the units to a lodge building with a parking lot. And at the end of a spur road, a concrete boat launch extended into my lake. A sign read Harrow Lake Retreat, a Lakewood Ridge community experience. I sat there in the truck for a minute, just staring at the development. Then I got out and walked to the water's edge. Everything about it looked the same. The water was clear like it always had been. But the shoreline, it was unrecognizable. The 199 cabins, the boat launch, and the floating dock. I opened the folder I'd carried with me from Alaska, the one that had the deed, the riparian rights, the county survey, everything I needed to prove the lake was mine. I flipped to page 4 of the riparian rights document, section 3, subsection B. The part that said no commercial enterprise could use the lake for profit without my consent. The part Garrison Priel must have skipped. I called Dana. "How long has the lodge been open?" 8 months. They opened in February. Cabins started filling up in March. I stared at the boat launch. "What did the county say when you filed the objection?" "They said the structures are on HOA land, not the lake. They don't regulate what the HOA does on their own land." I looked at the boat launch again. "The issue is the lake," I said. "My lake bed. They've built all this on my property." I called Garrison Priel at 6 p.m. His voice sounded smooth, prepared. "Mr. Calloway, I understand you have concerns about the development. You built a commercial resort on my lake," I said. I need you to explain why. There was a long pause. The resort infrastructure is entirely on HOA land, he said. The boat launch is a minimal infrastructure improvement consistent with the community's riparian access rights. Did you read the riparian rights instrument before you built those 199 rental cabins? Did you read it? I pressed. Another silence. His attorney had obviously never read page 4. I made it clear that the boat launch was permanent. I had never been asked for permission. Garrison's response: he would have his attorney review it. Fine. I told him my attorney would be in touch. Dana and I stood on the western shore of the lake watching the last light fade over the water. Garrison was going to have to fix this. I knew that much. And I was going to make sure he paid for what he'd done. The next few days, I went to work with my attorney, Elena. She began pulling all the documentation, the entire history of the lake, the original deed and the survey, every legal instrument that governed this property. We filed suit. A civil injunction was the first move, stopping the resort's use of the lake for commercial activities. The state enforcement came next, citing the environmental violations from the stormwater discharge pipe. And last, the trespass claim for the concrete boat launch and the floating dock. When we filed, Garrison's resort started to fall apart. Bookings dropped by 71% in 2 days. And Garrison, he came to my door asking for a resolution. His attorney had clearly advised him that he'd reached the end of the road. He wanted to talk. Did you read the riparian rights instrument before you built this? I asked again. He hesitated, unable to answer. Elena will send you the negotiation framework. I said you respond to her from this point on. I closed the door knowing the wheels were in motion. Months went by and Garrison tried to settle. But in the end, the truth was clear. He had assumed access meant ownership, and now he had to pay the price. His financial model collapsed, and we reached a settlement worth $24.09 million. Garrison's resort was forced to remove the dock system and the boat launch restore the riparian buffer and cover the environmental damages. His entire operation had been built on a lie. He never contacted me, the owner, and now the consequences were clear. I sat by the lake one evening, the last of the restoration crews packing up. The cabins across the water stood empty. Garrison had built a resort on my lake, but without the lake, those cabins were just empty shells. And you know what? He didn't read the one thing that could have saved him, page 4 of the riparian rights instrument. You can build whatever you want on your land, but you can't build a business on mine. So here's the big question. How far can developers go before their unchecked greed becomes too much? Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours?
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.